Thanks for tuning into Howe's Things, a podcast from the David A. Howe Public Library. I'm Nick Gunning. My guest today was a regular contributor on the All the Book Show. She's a professional editor and is the co-host of the podcast previously on X-Men for the Radio Meanwhile Network. Hilary, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I say us, but it's just me.
Yeah.
Well, it's me and you.
Us.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it does make sense. Thanks. Today, I've asked Hilary to join me here because we're going to be talking about the new Marvel Disney Plus series, WandaVision. Are you excited?
I am excited.
Was this a series you were anticipating? Was it one you were excited about?
Yeah, well, I kind of went back and forth on it. I think by the time it came out, I was pretty excited about it.
Okay.
I've been back and forth on my feelings about Wanda and the Avengers.
Okay. And if you're new to the game, Wanda in comics is more widely known as the Scarlet Witch.
The Scarlet Witch.
Popping back and forth between X-Men and Avengers, though I always associate her with the X-Men in my mind.
I do too. I associate her with the X-Men. She is hardly with them at all.
Huh.
She's almost exclusively with the Avengers.
Okay. Well, agree to disagree. All right, but save this magic for segment time because we're not there yet. Let's open the books, see where we are in our bookmarks. What have you been reading?
What have I been reading?
It's not a trick question, just a regular.
Yeah. Probably the biggest thing I've been reading is the V.E. Schwab series, the Shades of Magic.
Yes.
I'm on book 3 now.
Okay.
So I'm kind of plowing through those.
I remember when that first came out, and I was confused about whether or not it was meant to be adult or young adult. Where would you put it?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question because the first book, I would lean toward adult.
Okay.
It's very, I found it to be unique. I don't read a lot of magic, urban fiction kinds of stuff, but which is funny because I don't think this is strictly urban fiction, but for some reason it has that feel to it. But anyway, that one felt more original and trying to do something different with magic and stuff. Okay. The second book I felt was very YA feeling. Like it just had those tropes, you know, like, I mean, I'll just say they have a big competition that magicians from everywhere have to participate in. So,
is there a love triangle?
There's not a love triangle.
Okay, well then it can't be YA.
That is another thing because in the first book, I don't want to spoil too much, but in the first book there was a friendship. Okay. And in the second book, there's romance. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have gone romance.
I see.
So that felt a little like they were. I don't know if someone was like, make it more YA, and so they just dove right in.
I can't remember why, but I remember when we first got these books, and I recall moving them from YA to adult. It's like, I think we purchased them thinking they were YA, and then as they were circulating, we were kind of like, well, maybe these are adult books, and that's where they sit now. But it's been a popular series all the way through. How did you find this series even?
I think it was just a book that I saw in a store.
Yeah, they've got really good covers. Yeah.
It's really good covers, and I read the first page or something like that, and there was something about the guy having a coat that he kept like changing it, and it was like a bunch of coats in one. I don't know. I just liked it. So
yeah, I don't typically read that kind of thing either. I did read one several years ago now called The Night Circus. So I want to say by Aaron Mortensen, and that was sort of I don't know. There was like rival magician, like, I don't know what groupings, you know, and there was conflict between them. And then the younger generation was trying to sort of do away with that. I was weirdly all in on that book, and it's very outside of the things I would normally pick up.
Did I say urban fiction or urban fantasy?
I think you said fiction.
I meant fantasy.
Fantasy.
I meant urban fantasy.
Well, those are decidedly different things. Okay, so is book 3 the final? Do you know? Is it a trilogy?
You know, I don't know. Okay. I guess I assume so.
Would you be down for a book 4?
I don't know.
Why are you down?
The first one I really loved.
Okay.
And I really liked the world that they were building.
Yeah.
So I want to say that I would definitely go for it, but the second one really dragged me down.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Huh. But you powered on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Any other comic books or anything like that?
Well, I started the Kamala Harris memoir that I got for Christmas.
Oh yeah.
I read, what's that Vision one I read?
Oh, Tom King's Vision, but let's save that for spotlight time.
I think that's it for reading lately.
All right. I finished a few things since last episode. I read On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. her book, The Hate You Give, is probably still on the YA bestseller list. I mean, that's just been a phenomenon for years. This is her follow-up on the come up, and it's not a sequel, it's a whole different set of characters. And this follows a girl who's trying to like make it in the rap scene. And it's just really interesting because it deals a lot with the pressure that she's receiving from all ends. You know, like some people are accusing her of being a poser. Some people are accusing her of like reinforcing dangerous stereotypes. And she's just kind of like stuck somewhere in the middle, just trying to make it. So I think it speaks to a lot of what that pressure is like. So, I mean, that was an intriguing part of it for me. Malika Costa, who has been on the All the Book Show several times, is going to join me for a book club on this in an upcoming episode. So I shall say no more now, but Malika and I are going to discuss it in the coming weeks.
Nice.
I finished Leia, Princess of Alderaan. This is a manga based on the novel by Claudia Gray. This was adapted by Haruchi, and another YA Claudia Gray Star Wars series was Lost Stars that was pretty successfully adapted into a 3-part manga series. I think you read that.
Yes, I did.
Did you like that?
You liked it? I didn't like it.
Well, I mean, I don't read manga, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing. It felt like it was replaying a lot of manga
just
stuff.
Like derivative of other things.
Yeah.
And okay. Well, I liked all 3 volumes, and I was ready for a volume 4, and I was sad when it was done. This is also, it's a pretty successful adaptation. Now, I hadn't read the novel Lost Stars, but I have read Leia, Princess of Alderaan. And what I appreciate about the book is that it does a nice job of weaving together all the different Star Wars eras. So, like, it's set when Leia's a teenager, so it pulls some things from, like, Rebels or the prequel era. You see her kind of finding her way, figuring out that her parents are part of the rebellion. Like, this is something she sort of stumbles on. And then her struggling to kind of find her way and what it means to be a part of that. It also uses Laura Dern's character from Star Wars The Last Jedi. Holdo is in it.
The only good character from that movie.
And it kind of, because in the movie they have this deep connection, and you're like, well, where did this person come from? And so this makes her like a childhood friend from Alderaan, which I thought was a really nice touch for that movie. So read that, thought it was really good. I assume it's going to be another 3-parter. Only the first volume's out right now, which we have in our collection. So if you haven't read it, check it out. I could check it out for you. I know a guy if you want to.
You know a guy?
If you'd like to read it. Yeah, I could do that. I'm currently reading Lie to Me by J.T. Ellison. Chris Bailey, who is the president of the Friends of the Library, is a huge fan of this author, and I've actually never read her. I snatched some J.T. Ellison books for Chris at the last library conference tour I was at, and I had some advanced copies here. So I'm reading this one. This is a little older. It's a thriller so far. It's sort of a dueling narrators setup so far, and I'm liking it.
Cool.
So we'll see.
Lie to Me what Batman says in
Swear to Me.
Swear to Me.
Yeah. The guy's like, I swear to God, and he's like, swear to me.
Yeah.
That horrible Batman
That's what I was
voice.
thinking of.
Why would you bring that up?
I'm sorry.
I'm reading The Dark Veil by James Swallow. This is for a book club I do with some friends. It's a Star Trek Titan book, and this is interesting. Probably not interesting to most people, but I'm going to tell you because
I'm interested.
You don't have anywhere you can go. This is a Star Trek Titan book, and this follows the character of Will Riker and Deanna Troi on the Titan after the series. There's been a whole batch of novels based on this that have all sort of been undone by the Picard series. Not unlike all of the Star Wars Expanded Universe being undone by the J.J. Abrams trilogy. But what they did was they used one of the authors who wrote the Titan series to write this new one to set it in the new Picard continuity. So technically it's a Picard book. But since it's using that writer, he's taken a lot of the hallmarks from that series and even original characters and sort of ported them over.
Oh, that's
so it's
nice.
a much more like seamless transition than it was to go from reading Star Wars Expanded Universe to like the Disney canon.
Yeah.
So
I guess I always thought that Star Trek was a little more, I don't know, like the books were more official for a while than they were in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, the thing I think that was different about it was that the Star Wars universe was very, very interconnected, always. It didn't matter who was writing it. Like most of the time, something that happened in another book would matter in a book by a new author.
Okay.
So they were all really connected, and there was a reading order. For years and years and years, the Star Trek books were sort of just set within the series and could be read, at any given time. And so they were a lot easier to just pick up and read.
Okay.
Once it sort of seemed like the dust had settled post-Nemesis and they weren't going to do anything else, they were kind of like, yeah, go ahead and continue the story. So all the series have been continued from that point on. Now they've sort of been rendered moot by Picard. But, we'll see. I appreciate that he was taking some of the things from the regular Titan series and sort of establishing them in the new canon.
That
I
is
think
nice.
that's cool.
That is nice.
So I'm reading that at the moment, and that's pretty much it for me.
Cool. Well, you win. You had more books than me.
Well, thank you. It's my job.
And you do it well.
All right, let's take a look at some book news.
Look into the future to see what it proves. It's time for book news.
Hilary, you're our guest. Would you do the honors? What is on the New York Times bestseller list for this week?
I will tell you, and I will start with number 10 because that's what you pointed at.
That's the countdown, yeah.
All right. Number 10, we have A Time for Mercy by John Grisham. That's a familiar name.
Yes, this
Somebody
is
I've heard of.
this is the third of the Jake Brigant series. His very first novel ever, A Time to Kill, and then Sycamore Row came out a few years ago, so decades after the original, and then this is the third book. So,
Okay.
I think if you read them as a trilogy, you would not know that decades were in between.
That's pretty impressive.
I think it's really impressive.
Yeah. Okay, so number 9, another familiar name, Nicholas Sparks with The Return.
Okay.
Less familiar name to me, number 8, Frederick Bachmann, Anxious People.
Yes, he's kind of a sleeper author. This was one that just sort of appeared out of nowhere. The books are all very stylized, like you would not mistake a Frederick Bachmann book for another author. I tried to read one and just could not get into it, but he's persistent.
Would I like
and
it?
remains popular.
I like stylized.
You might dig it a little bit more than I. Yeah. I actually think you would.
All right, cool.
A failed bank robber holds a group of strangers hostage at an apartment open house.
Is
In
that what
case
I'm
you're
supposed to be
curious.
doing?
Well, I'm just telling the nice people.
Okay.
Hey, look what's next here.
So should I do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Number 7, V.E. Schwab, the guy who wrote the books that I sort of like. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. A Faustian bargain comes with a curse, well, that's how it goes, that affects the adventure Addie LaRue has across centuries.
And again, I can't stress this enough to listeners. If somebody comes to you with a Faustian bargain,
Faustian?
walk away, my friend.
Yeah, if they're like, hey, excuse me, sir.
Walk away.
I have a Faustian bargain for you. They're laying their cards on the table.
Yeah.
You know what you're getting. It's not
Ruin.
going to be good.
Ruin.
Number 6, Delia Owens, Where the Crawdads Sing.
Wow.
Surprise!
Wowzer.
She's still on here.
124 weeks on the list.
I can't remember if I liked this.
124 weeks. I honestly, did you read it?
I did read it.
Okay.
I think I liked it.
I've talked about it so much. I'm not
This
even gonna...
it has it's like past and future thing, and I think it was one of those ones where I liked one,
Yes.
but not the other.
I've said many a times that I feel like the mystery and the future element of it, I would have snipped that right out.
Yeah,
I don't think it adds to it at all.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. Okay, number 5, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Nora Seed finds a library beyond the edge of the universe that contains books with multiple possibilities of the lives one could have lived. I want to know who writes these synopses
I don't
because
like the
the
sound of
wording is awful.
Oh, blame the New York Times.
I
guess.
do blame the New York Times. It's
Okay.
just it's very hard to follow.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 4, Star Wars: Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. In this installment of the High Republic series, a disaster in hyperspace may cause far greater damage than...
Yeah. Huh.
See what I'm saying?
It is bad. You're right. You're
All
right
right.
about that. This is an interesting one. Let me tell you a little background. First of all, I read Charles Soule writes a lot of Star Wars comic books. He wrote the whole Poe Dameron series, and it was just okay.
Okay.
It was just okay. The High Republic series is set way in the past, and back when we had Justina Ireland on the All the Book show, she was in the process of writing her entry in the High Republic. And so we talked a little bit about this. And I honestly can't remember if this was off mic or on, but she said that the process of writing these High Republic series was a lot more like a television writer room where
Oh.
the authors all kind of know each other and all the stories are sort of meant to be cohesive and stick together. So there's a lot of like, oh no, this character wouldn't do that, or well, I was going to have him do this, so could you have that reflected in the thing? She said it was a much more collaborative process, a much more interesting journey to get those all together and put out. So this is the first adult novel that came out, Light of the Jedi. Justina Ireland's younger age book, Test of Courage, is coming out, and I gotta feel like that's an Ewok reference, because I know in that interview she, like me, is a big Ewok fan, and that sounds eerily similar to a Caravan of Courage, so I don't know. But
I don't know what that is.
That's that Star Wars, it was like a TV movie about the Ewoks.
Okay, listen, I have to say this.
Yeah.
I keep hearing you talk. You've talked to several authors and Star Wars-y people,
Yes.
and you always end up bringing up this Ewok show that
Yeah.
you watched.
Yes.
And you always say it as if it's anything that anyone has heard of, and they have not.
Is it true?
Nobody knows about this.
No, they do.
No,
it depends
they don't.
on the age.
Do a Twitter poll.
You don't think...
I do not think this is the thing people know
There
about.
was droids and there was Ewoks. And
I know,
Ewoks
because you
lasted
have told me
quite-
that. But I have never heard of this.
Ewoks lasted for a long time. There was a really popular comic book series that went after it.
Okay, well,
So
I'm
you think I've been saying it and people have just been
Yes.
politely being like, oh, the Ewoks
well, I mean,
cartoon.
to be fair, these are people who
They're Star Wars authors.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
But I do kind of feel that way because
Okay.
every time I'm listening and you're like, I watched the Ewoks thing, I'm just like, they don't know what you're talking about.
Well, there was an Ewoks cartoon and then there were 2 Ewok movies. Regardless, Justina Ireland knows all about the Ewoks.
all right.
But it's a good note and I'm going to take it to heart. So where were we at? I lost track. Number 4. Okay, so what's
we
number
just did
3,
Star Wars.
Hillary?
So number 3 is Neighbors by Danielle Steele.
Oh my gosh.
Who I know you love.
She's a powerhouse.
Powerhouse.
She's unstoppable.
I'm going to do the synopsis
Please.
now. A Hollywood recluse's perspective changes when she invites her neighbors into her mansion after an earthquake.
Huh. Danielle Steele's really just throwing that pasta on the ceiling, seeing what happens.
See what
isn't
sticks.
she?
It usually sticks.
Good
so
for her.
What are you going to do? Number 2, The Scorpion's Tale
With
by...
The Rock?
No,
That movie with The Rock.
that's the Scorpion King.
Love that movie.
That is different.
I've always loved
Scorpion's
that movie.
Tale is by Douglas Preston and Lincoln
I
Child.
don't care about that.
The second book in the Nora Kelly series, an FBI agent and an archaeologist identify a mummified corpse and its gruesome cause of death.
Okay.
Number 1, The
Hey,
Vanishing Half
we
by
did it.
Britt Bennett. The lives of twin sisters, I'm a twin sister,
I know.
who run away from a southern black community at age 16 diverge as one returns and the other takes on a different racial identity, but their fates intertwine. As you might expect.
Yes, I would expect that. I've read this book, and it's one of our book club picks for this year. We're going to be covering this one in February.
Cool.
Our January book club pick was A Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. Do you remember that one?
I do. I liked that one. I think you didn't.
No, I liked that one a lot. That was one of my top picks
What
of
am I
whatever
thinking
year
of?
that came out. I don't know. But that one was good. There's a movie that's coming out with Amy Adams, and I feel like that is weak casting.
Yeah, it's not obvious
No.
casting. I don't know why they would go that direction.
No, and I feel like Amy Adams also did Sharp Objects, which
Yeah.
shares some DNA with it. So I just think it's a strange
Yeah, it is odd.
choice, but whatever. I'll see it.
Yeah, I liked
Probably.
the book, so.
Okay. Should we get into some WandaVision?
Yes, we should.
Okay.
Does that mean we get to watch more?
No, there's only 3
There's
episodes
just
out.
the 3 still.
3 episodes out as we record. Okay. So, this series, WandaVision, came out on January 15th, 2021. Meant to come out much sooner. It was meant to come out in 2020, and I believe originally it was actually supposed to be the second of the new like TV series set in the cinematic universe after Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that got pushed for I don't remember why. Do you remember? Did something happen?
Well, I keep thinking it's...
No, it was the pandemic.
Okay, but see, I keep thinking that it was before that it got delayed.
The WandaVision got delayed?
Well, because I felt like it was coming.
Yeah.
Like it was imminent.
Yeah.
And then it just kept not showing up. And then the pandemic happened, and nothing showed up.
Well, maybe it's that Falcon and the Winter Soldier got delayed, which pushed WandaVision. But even like early days of pandemic, they were still saying it was going to be late 2020, and it eventually got pushed to January 2021.
Yeah.
But so this makes this really the official of the new wave of things. The first Marvel. What is it, the MCU? The Marvel Cinematic Universe shows.
Mm-hmm.
Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. intersected with it and shared some characters, obviously. This is sort of the new, like, Disney Plus model of doing these shows, and this is kind of the, I don't know, the test run for that.
Yeah.
So it released with 2 episodes, which I think was brilliant, because I think you really needed
definitely.
to get the premise.
You got to settle into it.
And as we record, the 3rd episode has aired, and we're looking at a total of 9. So we're a third of the way through the end of this thing.
I like that. It's got like a mini series feel to it.
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to go much beyond that. In fact, the CW shows, which are still running like 20, 25 episodes, I'm just
don't know
like,
why.
pump the brakes.
Yeah.
Pump the brakes. But let's talk a little bit about the characters before we get into the series.
Let's
All right?
do it.
So, Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, first appeared in X-Men number 4 in 1964, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, so not too shabby.
I've read that.
Have you?
I have.
What is that like?
Early.
Yeah.
It's like early comics.
I haven't read the earliest of the X-Men, so I don't really know. I've read a lot of Jack Kirby. And Stan Lee's really early stuff is always like super, super wordy. Is it wordy?
I don't remember wordiness particularly, but I mean, it could have been. It's
right.
just, I usually get wrapped up in the art. of
Okay.
it.
Do you remember I mean, like I said, I always associate her with the X-Men. And I think it's probably because the connection with Magneto. Like, depending on what era.
I think it's the connection with Magneto, and she's in one of the shows.
I think she's in all of them. I think she's in all of the animated series.
Is she in the original?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, I guess we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember her from X-Men Evolution.
Well, I always think about her, because her brother, Quicksilver, at various points it changes, but like when I was a kid, it was like they were Magneto's children. That was just the thing.
Well, here's what I think is my trajectory of like how I connect her with things.
Okay.
I think that I connect her with the X-Men because she did start there.
Yeah.
And because of her brother.
Yeah.
Because Pietro ends up being a villain.
Right. I always think
X-Men.
of him as a villain as well, yeah.
And so I guess that just kind of locks him in that universe,
yeah.
and then I think of her, and she is connected with them. She's considered a mutant for a long time before they change it, and she's considered Magneto's daughter for a while until they changed that.
Yeah, that was established like definitively in a 1982 miniseries, a 4-issue miniseries, Vision of the Scarlet Witch, which is actually pretty solid, and I feel like as reading that, like after we watched the first episodes of WandaVision, kind of shifted my perception about what I maybe feel like is happening in WandaVision. So, but we'll get into that. Do you remember what your first impression, like when was the first time you came across that character? It was just the animated series, you think? Or Evolution?
Well, I mean, it must have been the animated series because I watched that before I saw anything else. I don't remember her in it, but I must have seen it. But when I think back, I think the first thing I think is Evolution.
When I was a kid, I would go to the comic book store with $1 or something and load up random issues from like the quarter boxes along the bottom. And I would get a lot of like Avengers and West Coast Avengers and stuff. And she is often in there. But even so, it was always like, oh, Magneto's daughter. And it still felt like an X-Men to me.
Yeah, we did when I co-host the Previously on X-Men podcast, and we did a spotlight early on Scarlet Witch, and we decided who we were going to do, and we told people ahead of time and everything. We did the whole thing. But as we were researching it and recording it, we were just sort of like, well, this is dumb because she's just an Avenger. We did it anyway.
But I mean, the House of M storyline where she takes all mutants away. I mean,
she's definitely integral. Yeah. But I don't know. She's not a team member in the same way.
Well, the other thing that really cemented her in the X-Men world for me were the old X-Men Legends 2 games. Because she's a playable character in that. And like that, again, I was not surprised to see her there. I was just like, the Scarlet Witch, right? Yeah. I always also thought of her like not necessarily, like as kind of not a villain, but even when I've read her in Avengers stuff when I was a kid, she always kind of seemed separate. She always kind of seemed like her own thing.
Well, she's erratic. That's kind of her defining characteristic. Yeah. I mean, it's part of her power, but it's also, I mean, she starts as a villain in that super, super early one. She's a villain for the X-Men. Yeah. And then she becomes a good guy, and then she's a bad guy, and then she's a good guy. And even when she's locked in with the Avengers as like an Avenger, she's one of the most well-known Avengers, she still ends up like being a major problem several times. Right. They end up using her.
So weird.
They end up using her as a very kind of world-changing problem.
I do remember her in X-Men Evolution. When was that? That was 2000s? When was that?
Yeah, probably. It was when I was in high school, I guess. So probably like 2000, 2002.
Okay. I don't remember her in the original series, but I know that she's in it. I know that she is. I know that she does show up. So I remember her there. In the MCU, she is kind of a late addition. She shows up in 2014 in Captain America: Winter Soldier. Yep. She and Pietro appear in that. And then she is pretty much there afterwards. She appears in that, then Avengers: Age of Ultron, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, and now, of course, WandaVision, played by Elizabeth Olsen. Yes. Which, I like her. I like her in the movies. She seems like I can never quite nail down what her powers are in the movies because it's always sort of this quasi. In the comics, it's like she's magic, and that really can kind of mean whatever they want.
That's exactly okay. That's exactly how it goes. When she's a mutant, it's like she creates weird probability things, but it functions even then as magic.
Yeah, I see. I find it interesting that explain her powers. Ideally what her powers should be.
Nick,
But
you
it's
can't.
okay, but it's like
You
probability
can't.
magic.
Right? I mean, right now, no. That's not really a thing anymore. That's how it started when she was a mutant. Now she's basically a sorceress.
Just a sorceress.
She's a sorceress. She has some history where she grew up on Mount Mandalore and there were like demons or something, and she was raised by a sorceress.
Bova.
There's all kinds of
cow?
Yeah, the cow.
Yes,
Yeah, she has
know that.
crazy history. So like there's an element to her that's just sort of this inherent magicness, but she's also a trained sorceress.
Okay. Well, there's an old 90s Avengers show that didn't last very long, an animated series that I remember and in that everything she says is like, I'm going to use probability magic to destroy you, and then she just like shoots a beam to destroy the person. It's just like, well, didn't you just shoot a beam? And in the MCU, it seems like she can just lift things with her mind. It seems like she's just...
Well, I think that
she's telekinesis.
I think she's kind of undergoing a very similar transformation in the MCU as she did in like her entire existence, because when she first shows up, she and Pietro are just these like genetically modified kids. Yeah. And which is similar to her beginning as a mutant. Right. But I think like now we're watching her in WandaVision, it definitely seems to have developed into something more like perception, magic-y stuff.
Okay.
So I think there's a little less internal consistency there than we usually get from the MCU.
I like her. I mean, I like her portrayal of the character, even though I never can quite trace like what's going on with her. And I've been incredibly impressed with her in WandaVision.
Oh, yes.
But let's take a look at Vision's history. So the Vision appeared 4 years after the Scarlet Witch. First appeared in Avengers number 57, 1968, created by Roy Thomas and John Buscema. Vision, I also have trouble because like he's in the movies, Tony Suit's AI Jarvis like becomes sentient and becomes the Vision. In the comics, it's much more convoluted, where it's like sometimes it's like part Wonder Man's brain and in the original like Golden Age Human Torch's body, and just all sorts of stuff happening.
Yeah, I think there are some characters from like way early comics that have sort of a crystal clear characteristic, and so they can just sort of like Wolverine. Yeah, he's just solid. Straight through. And then there are ones like Vision and Wanda that morph unbelievably throughout their
they're much more
time.
Nebulous. Yeah. Well, and Vision is usually connected in some way to Ultron. Like that's usually a part of the origin. So the movies did kind of incorporate that.
Yeah. Well, what I think the movies did with Vision was I think that they saw, Vision is a Avenger, that's an actual person. I think that they very smartly found a way to bring him in just with what they had. I mean, they had Jarvis, which was basically an AI. They had this Ultron thing that was happening. They've got Tony experimenting with robots. I mean, it just sort of like fell in their lap.
I think it was a really natural evolution to get Vision where he is. And I think Paul Bettany's portrayal of Vision is great in the movies and just off the charts in the show.
Very good.
I've always associated Vision with the Avengers, unlike Scarlet Witch. Vision to me is always locked in as an Avenger.
Definitely.
And he was another one where like in West Coast Avengers I would see him, but my initial interaction with him would have been Captain America the Avengers for Sega. He was one of 4 playable characters in that, and I rarely played as Vision, but I thought he was super cool because his shield would just make him, so he thinks, what is that word where you can pass through things? What is that word?
Intangible?
Okay. And so that was his shield, and I always thought that was really cool. But I didn't really know much about the Vision until, ever, I guess. Just Vision is a robot. That was the extent of my knowledge.
I think my first experience with Vision was House of M.
Oh, okay.
Which was a funny place to be dropped in.
I've never read that.
Yeah, it's Scarlet Witch going crazy, basically.
Okay.
And so you start with her having her fake babies, and Vision's there and stuff. And so, like, that was it.
Okay.
Like, I had no idea about their relationship. I had no idea who he was. That was just, I was like, Scarlet Witch is apparently with this robot guy.
Okay.
And that was my very first experience with him.
Well, yes, that's a weird place to start with that character. Let's see. So where did he first debut in the Avengers? Well, that's kind of a funny thing. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Paul Bettany started voicing Jarvis, Iron Man's suit's AI, in the very first Iron Man movie, and was just sort of there in the background the whole time in any of the Iron Man movies or Avengers. And it wasn't until Age of Ultron where things happen between Ultron and Jarvis, where Jarvis is sort of given sentience and becomes the Vision.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really cool transition, I thought.
I know. I mean, and they lucked out with the casting of Paul Bettany as that.
I know.
Just,
What if it
like,
had just
voiceover
been... Yeah.
role? You know.
What if it had just been like some dude?
Yeah.
You know, like it
Yeah.
could have been anybody.
What I think is really, it's like a funny little Easter egg, is that in Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man's like high-tech suit that Tony made has a voice in it, and it's Jennifer Connelly, who is married to Paul Bettany.
That's funny.
So, you know, that's just kind of a funny little quirk in there. So we see him as Vision first in Age of Ultron, but then he's around for Civil War and Infinity War, and spoiler alert on Infinity War,
Spoilers!
he dies.
He get killed.
And then we don't see him in Endgame. We don't see him again until WandaVision.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of one of the central... I mean, there's many mysteries about the show, but I think Vision's appearance in it is part of the driving mystery about like what exactly is going on here. Before we get into the show, let's talk comic books a little bit. So now you said that you read them in House of M. I know we've both read the recent series, the 2015 Scarlet Witch series by James Robinson. And that is, it's 15 issues, 3 volumes, which we have all in the collection. And that's really focused more on her being a magical character.
Yeah, I
So
don't think Vision shows up at all.
He does.
He does?
Yes, he does. There, as the series goes on, like it starts, the first volume starts very standalone, where there's disorder in the magic world. Something about witchcraft is like broken.
Yeah.
And she's on this journey to sort of right whatever is throwing off the mojo of magic.
Yeah.
As
That
the
was
series,
great.
thank
Mojo
you,
of magic.
thank
Love
you.
that.
As the series progresses, we see more of the Avengers. We see Pietro, and by the end, it feels like it's just tied in with the mainstream continuity. I found that I like this series less as each volume ticked on because of that.
Yeah, it was a nice way to follow her, to have her just be on her own little mission.
Yeah, I don't think you need to connect it. I really don't.
Well, I think it works really well for her particularly, because whenever she gets tangled up with the main storyline, she ends up killing everybody.
Right, yeah.
So it's nice to just have her doing her own thing.
Yeah.
And solving problems.
Well, I think you just don't have to deal with the fact that she's a troublesome character if she's just off on her own side quest mission. I just really think that's a better use of the character. I loved the aesthetics of all of the cover art in that. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
That,
I do.
Black, red, and white are the only colors you see. It's just very cool.
Really cool.
The art stays like that for the first several issues, but again, as the volumes go on, it becomes more and more just like a mainstream comic. There's a connection with Civil War II, that big Captain Marvel, Iron Man rumble, which is just like, you don't need it in a book like that. So I was kind of disappointed in that.
Yeah, that was especially weird because there's so much convoluted politics going into
Exactly.
that, which had nothing to do with the previous
so
stuff.
to toss it into that series, I don't know. I guess I don't really know what you would give somebody who is a Scarlet Witch fan. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like House of M would be a good place just because it gives you all the really crazy stuff.
But isn't she like the antagonist in that?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess I only think that because that's my main starting point with like her storyline.
I've never, not until very recently, and only the more recent comics, but I've never read Avengers comics. You know, like I know that I have a handful in my old quarter boxes that I leafed through as a kid, but it was never a series that I was particularly interested in following.
I've read several, but I think she was always somewhere else.
Okay.
Like I did some West Coast, and I think I just, wherever I was, she was on the other coast.
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's not that I think the James Robinson series is bad. I just think like it starts interesting and it's just diminishing returns after that. I think if you were a fan of Scarlet Witch or Wanda that you see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and you picked up the James Robinson series, you'd be like, what is going on? What is this all about?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I go back and forth on Wanda in the MCU.
It's a long game, I guess.
It is a long game. Like once you get to WandaVision, you sort of have a feel for her character and like her relationships and stuff.
Yeah.
When she starts, she's barely Scarlet Witch. Like she wears red and has weird magic powers, and and a twin, I guess.
Yeah.
But like she doesn't feel to me initially at all like Scarlet Witch.
That was kind of an interesting thing. I remember when that was happening, when like Age of Ultron was coming up in the X-Men universe, which was at the time, Fox owned the X-Men and Marvel still had the rights to their main characters. But because of the convoluted history of the Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, both companies had the rights to use the characters. And so we had that moment, much like when Never Say Never Again and Octopussy came out and we had 2 James Bonds, where Age of Ultron and what I guess X-Men First Class were both using Quicksilver at least. And it's so weird. I was like, why would you fight over those characters? It's such an. I was surprised that either one wanted to use the character, but the fact that both.
Well,
did,
it makes sense that Wanda just is a very integral character to the Avengers.
Yeah.
So I get that. I think Quicksilver they just like for the X-Men. I think they just think he's fun. There isn't a really obvious other character for that type.
I hate to be the guy who played Quicksilver in Age of Ultron.
I know.
Because in the X-Men universe, Quicksilver is just so fun and funny and has the most memorable scenes.
He's the one that people will know.
And I could not pick the Quicksilver from the MCU out of a lineup if he was in costume.
He seems
I couldn't do it.
I can't remember if this is true or if it's just what he looks like, but he seems like the kind of person where they hired a model rather than an actor.
Okay.
It just has that feel.
Well,
like he just doesn't bring anything to it.
Yeah, I mean, the way that branches off where the X-Men go on with Quicksilver and the Avengers go on with Scarlet Witch. And now, of course, they're all under, Mickey Mouse's clubhouse or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're coming to Scarlet Witch from the MCU, I still am kind of stumped.
I don't think there's anywhere to go.
There's nowhere to go.
Like, if you want the comics for that Scarlet Witch, you're not going to find it.
You're not going to find it. Okay. And were you okay with the James Robinson series?
Yeah, I liked
okay.
it. I mean, the thing that stands out the most is like the art.
Okay.
And I guess her kind of standalone style for a while there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it was pretty good.
Yeah.
If you want Scarlet Witch, but if you're looking from the movies,
you're not gonna find it. Yeah. Now, Vision, on the other hand, there's been a couple of Vision and Scarlet Witch series, like going back to the '80s. The one in '82, which I have read, is decent. That one is about them deciding they don't want to be Avengers anymore and trying to just have like a domestic life, which of course doesn't work well. In that, Vision is injured, and what you see is a manifestation of his mind trying to put things back together. And so it made me kind of wonder if maybe it's a bit of a misdirect in WandaVision and we're actually kind of seeing Vision's side of things. But
Nick.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen that read that anywhere.
The one thing that is really holding me up for that is the twins.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's such a big delusion for her.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit then, because in the James Robinson series, the fact that Scarlet Witch has these twins is a bit of a plot point where you hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, it's like after the fact.
Yes,
where it sort of explains what had happened.
But I still don't fully understand what she made.
Well, it's okay. It's another one of those things that's been rewritten a couple times, but the overarching track for the twin thing is she has these twins.
Yes.
She gives birth to them.
Okay.
She experiences giving birth to them. They are somehow Vision's children, whatever.
Okay.
And everyone is always sort of like, what's the deal with this? And it's always just kind of fishy.
Yeah.
But she believes that they're real.
Okay.
And then it turns out they are not real. She manifested them.
Oh.
They don't exist.
So again, her magic can just do whatever the moment calls for. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think in this moment, it had come to a point where it was very perception based. Like she could adjust reality itself.
Okay.
So in that way they did exist, but they just didn't really.
Okay.
And then eventually we find out that somehow she had taken pieces of a demon to use, and this is all unconscious, I think, for her.
Okay.
But she made their souls, the souls of her twins, out of pieces of a demon.
I don't think we're going to see this in WandaVision.
I don't think so. So anyway, that's a whole
Right.
If you know anything about Scarlet Witch, you know this weird thing about the twins.
Okay.
And so that's the reason that I'm still stuck with it being a
that's
Wanda
true.
delusion, because, I mean, as soon as they have the twins, it's just locked right in there.
Well, and that's a plot point in Tom King's Vision series, which I want to talk about, because when that came out, that was everywhere. I mean, it got a ton of awards. It was really well received. And the Vision series is, I want to say, 12 issues. We have it in the library set in 2 volumes. And it is about Vision creating a family for himself, like a
physical family.
Right.
He makes robot family.
Yes. And it's just them sort of trying to be like, all right, I was an Avenger, and now I have a robot family, and I'm just an average Joe. Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, that's crazy. It shouldn't work as a graphic novel, and it does.
Yeah.
And that's what's so impressive about it.
It's
it
the
just
style.
Really
There's
works.
something about the style that's just really, really interesting.
And the aesthetic of that show was a major influence on the creators of WandaVision.
Yeah. So, you can definitely see that.
Yeah.
You can definitely see that.
Yeah, because it is Vision trying to have an idealized version of really kind of a 1950s, 60s nuclear family.
Basically, and it's got kind of the surreal feel to
does.
it because it's a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of him in his robot self
Yeah.
pretending or like trying to convince himself that this is a thing that could really work, and like the family who isn't really real trying to convince themselves that they are real, and it's very kind of crazy.
I feel like, the only places that I was really lost in that was the parts dealing with the Scarlet Witch, because I just wasn't really aware of the whole thing with her twins and all that. So when that comes into play, I was a little lost. Other than that, I feel like you have everything you need. Vision is not an Avenger anymore, but that stuff all happened. He's trying to just have this normal life. They give you all that in the thing. So I think if you're only familiar with the character from the movies, I think you would be okay reading that.
Maybe. I'm not sure how invested I feel like you'd have to have a certain amount of investment in the character to get into that storyline, because I think a lot of it depends on him and like caring about him, which I don't know if they give you that, or if you come in with that.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to have that. I mean, but I think the family interactions, and I think the fact, like, you see Vision struggling to try to make it all work, I think that's apparent. So if it was just a total standalone kind of thing, not connected to the Avengers, just an original piece, I feel like there's enough in there that you might have buy-in for that character.
It's possible.
It's hard to say. Regardless,
I'm skeptical.
Okay, I still think it's just a really good story.
It is really, really good,
and it's just really effective for what it's trying to do. So I don't think any of these things are really necessary to have read or have knowledge of before watching WandaVision. I think if you're just a fan of the MCU, you're fine to just watch WandaVision. But why don't we get into that a little bit? So as I said, it debuted on January 15th of 2021. Created by Jacques Schaefer and directed by Matt Shakman. We've seen 3 episodes. As we record, 3 episodes are all that exist in the world. So where we've left the characters in the MCU, Vision dies. Or so we're
which I had just like put out of my mind. Like, we watched 2 episodes of WandaVision, and I was like, hang on.
Yeah.
Isn't he dead?
Yeah, because, I mean, again, this is spoiling the latter-day MCU films, but Vision was powered by an Infinity Stone, so they needed it. Thanos needed it.
Yeah.
And that's, so without the Infinity Stone, no Vision. Scarlet Witch makes it to the end of Endgame, but you don't really kind of see the aftermath of here, and you basically jump from Endgame to WandaVision, where we're in a 1950s, like an idyllic 1950s sitcom, clearly modeled on the Dick Van Dyke Show, right down to the set, modeled on the Dick Van Dyke Show, but shades of I Love Lucy and other like contemporary shows, I think, are mixed in there a little bit. And you don't really get too much of a peek inside what's happening, why this is happening.
No, in the first episode, you get like very minor glimmers. Like, most of it is you're just dropped in and they just are these characters. She's the wife, he's the husband, that's just it. And you could almost think that what they're doing is just using the actors to do a funny little thing. Like, it doesn't even have to be a whole thing. But you do get little tiny things, which I think are a lot to do with the acting. It's just really small moments where you're like, is that a break? And you can't quite tell if she's like, now she's kind of like breaking out of the illusion for a second. But in that first episode, that's basically all you get.
So in the 3 episodes that have aired so far, the first is Dick Van Dyke, the second is more Bewitched, and the third is kind of 70s Brady Bunch. And within those, the supporting characters all stay the same. Like, you have the same neighbors, you have the same coworkers and stuff, but the settings change drastically. And in each episode, you get a little bit more of a peek into the fact that something is wrong. Something
weird.
is happening, and it really sort of seems like Wanda is the only one who is truly aware. Like,
well, but it has that kind of like delusion-y, self deluding thing to it, because like, she's the one who breaks in the first 2 episodes. Vision doesn't break.
No.
Wanda's the one who breaks, but she always seems confused. A little later, she's more in denial. But until I think the end of the 2nd episode, maybe into the 3rd episode, you don't see her being in control of anything. But eventually it does kind of get there where it feels like maybe she's controlling the narrative.
So it seems to me the mystery that we're setting up is primarily just what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, who's in control of this? What is the purpose of it? What is the end game? What's the state of vision? And you just don't know. And the thing that impresses me so much about it is that it is so wholly different than anything the MCU has put out.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a completely different thing. And I mean, I'm just really impressed by that. And I'm really impressed by the acting of both Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, because while nobody's doing an impression, I mean, Paul Bettany is not playing Dick Van Dyke in that first episode.
No.
They are nailing the tone of characters in those settings.
Yeah. I remember one of the first reactions I had to the very first episode was that I would just watch that show.
Agreed. I know. I felt
like,
the same way.
The mystery is great. And like, you definitely want to know what's going on. And the more they crack, it gets very interesting. But like, honestly, I would just watch the two of them.
I know.
Have a cute little 50s sitcom, just a whole season.
It is funny because when Vision is at home, even though he's dressed in whatever era they are, when it's just the two of them, he is in the full Vision guise. Yeah. And when there's other people around or he's going to work or whatever, he's just, normal. It's just Paul Bettany.
Yeah, he's just got like a 70s hair
whatever the hair is. But he in the Brady Bunch episode just captures so many of these little like asides and little it's almost like mugging for the camera that is just so spot on, like Robert Reed in the Brady Bunch, and same with Elizabeth Olsen in the Bewitched episode, which I know the least about, but I know Elizabeth Montgomery, and she's really hitting those little tiny marks.
That was the really interesting thing, because those first two episodes, they're both black and white.
Yeah.
And the changes between the first episode and the second one are much more subtle.
Yeah.
And so it'd be harder to see, like, that they're changing eras of TV. Like, it's clear now that they're doing like this era, then this era, and then this era. But between those first two, it'd be harder to know. But you can just tell from her acting, not even Paul Bettany's in those first two. It's her acting that you're like, she's a Mary Tyler Moore, like sweet, like doing whatever her husband says type. And then she's a Bewitched type, which is much more
assertive.
Assertive, and she's got like a career and like those kinds of things. You just see that transition in I mean, it's in the costuming, but it's also in her her attitude.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the thing that amazes me is like these people were cast for very specific reasons that have nothing to do with what they're being asked
very
to do
specific
right now.
and very limited.
Yes.
I mean, particularly Paul Bettany, but even Scarlet Witch. I mean, like Elizabeth Olsen is in that first movie, she's just like mystical, whatever, like it doesn't have to be anything that deep.
Well, what I've heard online is that the amount of screen time Scarlet Witch has in the MCU is dwarfed by just the first episode of this. When you see her for 30 minutes straight, that's like the most you've seen of this character.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she's cast 7 years ago to play the Scarlet Witch in Age of Ultron. Nobody was thinking but could she play a Mary Tyler Moore type in a spoof of a sitcom? We really need to be sure. So the fact that that's what's happening now and they can do it
so well.
And I really want to know who is the expert on all of these, because the tiniest little touches are just right.
They're just really right.
And that's crazy. I read it.
And while not being spoofy.
No, they're not.
Like, they're not.
They're
it's
straight.
Not like, let's do it like making fun of them or anything. Like, there's nothing over the top about any of the portrayals. They're just dead on.
No, I'm excited for the 80s, I've got to tell you. I read an interview where it came out that Dick Van Dyke was actually like a consultant on the show to talk about like what made the Dick Van Dyke show work and,
That's awesome.
and how they did that show and everything. And what's so delightful about this interview is that his complete lack of knowledge of the MCU, where they're explaining like Endgame, it was the biggest movie of all the time, and Dick Van Dyke is like, well, that's great,
Good for you.
It's just so like classic Dick Van Dyke, but yeah, I mean, it's really impressive to see it happen. So I'm very excited. I mean, it's old school, where we're waiting every week to get the next episode out to see what's going to happen. But
I don't like the waiting.
No, I don't either. And I was very disappointed when week 2 was just one episode, because I wanted a bigger bite of the apple story-wise. Because you really, the quotient of like how much is sitcom spoof and how much is actually like what's going on is like, maybe 20-25 minutes of sitcom and maybe 5 minutes of plot, you know. And it's really, I mean, it's playing out nicely, but I just want more, As a Scarlet Witch fan, are you seeing a little bit more of the kind of Scarlet Witch that you want to see, or does it not feel like that to you?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a hard question to answer, because she's not being herself.
Right.
at all. But
Yeah.
I guess when you see the little... The way that the mystery is playing out feels right to me, because there's so much of that, like, what is reality stuff going on. So I think it does feel... That feels more authentically Scarlet Witch to me than just her waving her hands and making things happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm all in.
I love it.
Me too.
I'd watch it for ever.
And I mean, I've always been excited about it just from still images, but I never watched the trailer or anything. So I was pretty surprised that the first episode really was just as straight as it was.
Yeah, I
and
think
that
I
we
saw
didn't
like
really
posters
get more.
and stuff
Exactly.
that sort of indicated that this was going to be an element.
I knew that was the vibe, but I still was surprised with what I got. So I think it's definitely worth the watch. Like I said, we've got you covered as far as Avengers and Vision and Scarlet Witch things in the collection. Lots in the graphic novel collection, including the 3-volume Scarlet Witch series, the 2-volume Vision series, all of the DVDs for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and whenever they decide to put WandaVision on DVD when it comes out, we'll have that too.
Is that a thing anymore?
I don't know. I guess, well, I mean, the Marvel Netflix shows are out on DVD.
Okay.
But it took a while.
Yeah.
You know, so it kind of depends whether they do that anymore.
Yeah.
But our physical media is still very popular. So, you know, if they put it out, we'll definitely have it.
Yeah.
So 2 thumbs up for me so far.
Yeah, me too.
And I feel like it's kind of nice when you consider how old the Marvel Cinematic Universe is and how many movies it encompasses.
Nick, it's so old.
I know that. And, like, they've really put in the time to be able to do this kind of storytelling.
Yeah, they laid the groundwork.
I mean, by the time you get to Infinity War and Endgame, and you just have like 30 A-list actors like fighting on the same shot, I mean, that's pretty impressive. The fact that you can build up to that point and then do this where you do an offshoot that's completely different, but you have like the audience trust to be like, just wait it out 9 episodes. It'll be worth it.
And they'll do it.
Yeah, and people are like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's really cool.
This is the kind of thing they would have put on ABC and would have been canceled after 2 episodes.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And, you know, I'm excited about Falcon and Winter Soldier.
I'm really excited about that.
Which, you know...
I was not excited about that. When was it? There's some movie where it's the 2 of them in
Civil
a car.
War. It's Civil War.
There's the 2 of them, and they're just in a car waiting for someone.
Yeah.
And they, like, get bickering.
Yeah, they don't like each other. That's my favorite.
And I was like, okay, I'm watching that show.
I felt, when that was announced, I was like, well, that seems like kind of a watered-down Captain America show, you know? But yeah, when we rewatched Civil War and just saw the bad attitude they had with each other, I was all in. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. So we'll keep an eye out for that. I don't think a real date has been announced for that yet. It might. So
I mean, you're the one who have told me, so I don't know.
All right. Well, Hilary, where can people find your podcast if they want to look for it?
I mean, anywhere you get podcasts. We're on Twitter at Previously on X.
Yep.
It's a pretty good place to find us. But if you just search for Previously on X-Men podcast, you'll probably find us.
Yep, radiomeanwhile.com. And over there on Twitter, what do you guys have next up? Do you know?
Coming out is the spotlight on the Sentinels.
The Sentinels.
The Sentinels. Yeah, usually we do character spotlights. Sometimes we do like a spotlight on a series.
Like a concept or
like
something?
like
a comic book
run.
Like
a comic book run. Mm-hmm. This time we did the Sentinels.
Okay.
If you like the Sentinels, you'll have a good time. If you don't, you'll enjoy my snark.
Okay. Okay. Well, next on How's Things, we're going to have Melanie Miller from the Alfred Box of Books on. The Alfred Box of Books is starting their own library podcast, so we're going to team up and chat about new books. So join us then in the coming weeks. Malik's going to be here to talk about On the Come Up, and then I have a special interview with sci-fi author Steve Barnes. So tune in for any and all of that. Hilary, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll see you next time.